Saatchi and Saatchi have worked on the Direct Line brand since 2014 when they won the account with quite a bold pitch idea to cast Harvey Keitel as Winston Wolfe, his character from Pulp Fiction. It must have seemed pretty counterintuitive at the time to advertise insurance with a gangster, but I think that's actually been one of the most entertaining ad campaigns of recent years, and it's been a big success for Direct Line. So I'm really interested to hear what two of the brains behind that idea have to say to each other.
Hi, I'm Richard Huntington. I'm the Chairman and Chief Strategy Officer of Saatchi and Saatchi, and I'm here at the top of Saatchi Towers with Mark Evans, the CMO of Direct Line Group and my client for the last 3 years. I always think it's a bit weird that these relationships start often in a formal pitch process. And I always wonder, what a client's first impressions of the agency are, particularly Saatchi and Saatchi, because we sort of have a reputation that sometimes precedes us. So what was your first impression of us?
Well, of course, you have to remember we were with M&C Saatchi, so we were kind of a bit self-conscious because there's obviously, there's history there. And then, I don't know if you remember, but on pitch day, there were some protesters outside the building dressed up as gorillas. So we just thought, maybe this is how Saatchi and Saatchi roll. And then, of course, the nothing is impossible, which is a sort of an inspiring message as you walk into the building.
I guess, for me, this was never another roll of the creative dice for Direct Line Group. This is quite a high risk, high reward moment. You had relaunched the brand a couple of years before. It hadn't quite worked. Yeah. And so, you go into this agency review with, as a client, there must be a sort of sense of, are we going to find an answer?
We tried previously a couple of times to cause an uprising internally and through communication to reverse the fortunes. But I suppose kind of those are the moments that you feel you're sort of groomed for and trained for all the years, to have the instinct and the judgment to know what ideas are going to succeed, what's really going to really resonate, the people that you can form a long-term strategic relationship with. As it's turned out, it's been amazingly successful and surpassed perhaps even what was expected.
The first time we came down to Bromley and we'd been talking, it was supposed to be a Q&A, but we went down with some strategic thoughts that were all hideously wrong, but it was an interesting bit of learning because we were then told what strategically the place we would need to be in, so it worked extremely well. And we walked out, and I remember saying to Paul Silburn, who was the creative lead, the ECD at the time, what this is about. This is about proper insurance, about fixing things, about making things right. And he said, it's a little bit like Winston Wolfe in Pulp Fiction when they've blown the brains out of that guy in the back of a Chevy Nova. Yes, Marvin, the man, yeah. And you go, you what? So really it starts as an analogy, and a lot of the process for us was taming that into an advertising idea. Winston Wolfe was always going to be tough to pull off because of the ownership of the intellectual property. But I think that allied with all of the insight that we'd been working on with you about what good insurance did, which wasn't give you some money. It was put things back as if they hadn't happened and allow you to get on with your life.
You're Jimmy, right? This is your house?
Sure is.
I'm Winston Wolfe. I solve problems.
Marcus, you called Direct Line exactly 2 hours and 37 minutes ago. You've got an uncontrollable leak, and you've tried to stop it yourself. The bad news is that Joey here is gonna have to remove your ball cock. Huh? The good news is that Joey's an emergency plumber, and that's covered under your Direct Line Home Plus insurance. I'll leave you two to it.
Despite the gorilla coming through the building, I had a good sense about it all. But there was a moment where you really just sort of let rip in terms of what you think was wrong with the industry, and you used a personal example. I think you'd maybe been mugged in Vietnam or something.
Yeah. I was in Vietnam just before the pitch, and I had my phone stolen on the street somebody on a moped. And I thought, that's fine. I'll get back to the hotel, I'll get my bag because I'd left it in the concierge, and I'll close down my iCloud account, and I'll, phone my wife who last heard me go, shit, as this phone was sped off somewhere. And I got back to the hotel and all my bags had been stolen from concierge. I then went into sort of, you melt down about like one thing going wrong I could deal with emotionally, but everything going wrong was really difficult. And I just remember there were two responses around me. One was from a client who was very empathetic and sympathetic and said it happened to them once and wasn't this terrible. The other was from an account handler from another agency who didn't offer any sympathy or empathy, just gave me their laptop to get into my iCloud account and their phone to phone my wife. And what I realized in that moment is maybe when the shit hits the fan, when things go wrong in your life that insurance is built to look after, you don't want a shoulder to cry on, you want somebody to sort it out. And that fitted perfectly with the personality of Winston Wolfe. It's not everybody's idea of fun and laughs, is it, insurance, from an industry, from a marketing industry and advertising point of view. I mean, I've fallen in love with the brand and the category through what we've done together, but you have a very clear vision for where insurance is going, which is quite intoxicating, I think.
I didn't grow up as a boy dreaming I want to insurance because I didn't know anything about it. There's a lot to love about insurance, in fact, not least because it's not baked beans or toothpaste, not to be too denigratory, but in the end this is people's lives, their livelihoods, when they're hospitalised after a car crash or they've lost all their worldly possessions in a flood or whatever it is. I mean, this is serious stuff, this is proper stuff. The sector had really been neglected from the basic principles of marketing for 2 decades, which makes it ripe for revolution.
You're driven by a combination of personal like North Stars or beliefs.
My wife is a nurse that worked at the sharp end of leukemia and bone marrow transplantation for many years, and so when I would get stressed as a graduate and come home and talk about, I don't know, whatever it was, did anybody die? 100% of the time the answer was no, so that was quite helpful. If I flip that round, I know you're eternally curious and love new ideas and love the big thinking that exists in the world. Where does that come from?
I had a not particularly unusual upbringing, but it wasn't that conventional. My parents role reversed when I was 15 and they gave up their careers and we went to live in penury in Somerset. But I think what came out of it is just I just hate the commonplace and the accepted wisdom, and that's not a bad thing as a strategist, because the first thing that you do when you look at a problem or a brand is go, well, everybody else is doing this, so clearly that's boring and ridiculous. And I want to do something completely different. Now, you can't end up there because you've got to create a solution which is demonstrably going to work, but it's not a bad starting point. And I have a little thing saying which is at the start of any project or piece of thinking, you should try and be interesting and not try and be right.
You're renowned for being able to get an audience, to captivate an audience around a new idea. So that doesn't come in a flash. So
no.
How did you cut your teeth, and what were the stepping stones or some highlights maybe of how you develop that capability to sell in that big idea?
In the late 1990s, I worked for Iceland Frozen Foods. I was working on a brand consultancy project, and you could see the board were thinking, oh, here comes that Soho advertising wanker. And I thought, there's nothing I can do about that. I am a Soho advertising wanker. But what I could do is be far more passionate about the brand or the business than they were. I often think that the only advertising that you can predict is poor advertising. You can predict it won't work. It's difficult to know whether you've got a 1 in 1,000 idea, a 1 in 10,000 idea, an idea that will help the business tick along, or an idea that genuinely will change things. We have quite a close relationship, but so often client-agency relationships are mediated through meetings, and it's just really lovely to spend some proper time, going back over old stuff and what you're doing there. Thank you very much.
Likewise, it's been good to talk.